Good morning, everybody. We really appreciate that you are here at this early hour for the very first session at CPDP 2025. And that you want to join us to discuss possible venues of exploring how to bring the AI Act from words on paper into actionable practices and activities. And I'm here with 4 experts representing different areas of societal engagement and critical inquiry. There would be Rob Heimann, who is a scholar at the Freie University of Brussels, but he's here not in his function as a researcher, but because he's on the advisory committee for the federal government of Belgium on data and AI. And then we have Angela Müller from Algorithm Watch. She's the executive director of Algorithm Watch Switzerland and is representing more the area of activism here. We have Arnika Zinke, who's an advisor at the Greens EFA party in the European Parliament. And then we have Katja Meyer, who's a senior scientist at the Center for Social Innovation at the University of Vienna. So we're going to discuss this, and when we wrote our abstract for this panel, that was before Trump took over, and we thought our only worry would be to think about how can the AI Act become feasible and can be applicable and can be enforceable. But now we have to deal with a much larger picture of transatlantic tensions. So AI became a geopolitical topic of global dimensions. When DeepSeek was released, it was framed as the AI equivalent for the Sputnik shock. The US prominently announced to pour millions of funding into developing better AI technology on the US side, and European politicians and corporate decision makers were quick to voice their fears that European regulation is actually slowing down innovation and AI development. And maybe you remember this meme that was out there at the time, where you could see a snake representing China and DeepSeek. You could see OpenAI for the United States, and you would see a plastic bottle with a fixed cap for representing the European Union, as if the only thing the European Union has to offer is over-regulating things. All of a sudden, the AI Act appeared as an obstacle to innovation, despite the fact that there are already countless loopholes in there which would allow most things that we actually don't want to see. And the proposed AI liabilities directive all of a sudden disappeared from the agenda. Meanwhile, in the US, Trump issued an executive order to limit the obligations and the tasks of the AI Safety Office, which was installed by his predecessor, Joe Biden. And in the wording, it was mentioned that the AI Safety Office shouldn't focus on identifying bias in data sets, labeling synthetic data, tracking the deepfake content, or optimizing models for fairness. That was done under the pretext of getting the ideology out of AI. But it is actually very clear that the ideology was put into the AI quite clearly. And everybody who attended yesterday's opening session heard Mireille Hildebrand emphasize how much AI and AI development and funding for AI is actually informed by different ideologies. So what are the ideological positions of the EU, and how will they translate into regulation and enforcement? Will the EU double down on their promise to keep citizens safe, require risk mitigation and limit or maybe even prevent harms constituted in AI? Will they provide the infrastructures and the necessary capacities to contest these technologies? Or will we see a watering down of laws? Will we see a hypocrisy that we see in different areas of the EU, especially at the outer borders of the EU, where values are quickly abandoned? So let's neglect for a moment the hypocrisy and focus merely on the promise of regulation for data and AI. The EU does not have a regulation problem, as neoliberals like to emphasize. It has an enforcement issue. As the EU's Artificial Intelligence Act approaches implementation, we discuss how this landmark legislation will be effectively put into practice through enforcement. So this panel will explore the practices for compliance and critical steps needed to ensure that the AI Act goes from legislative framework into an effective instrument for governing AI across Europe. And we will focus on practical solutions, key mechanisms for ensuring compliance and practices for supervisor bodies, oversight bodies, monitoring AI systems. We think about the contributions NGOs and activists might provide in holding organizations accountable. And we think about the challenges for policymakers they face in translating the regulation into actionable practices. So I will invite our speakers to very quickly introduce themselves and present their own perspective on these different challenges, and we will quickly invite the audience to pitch in. One objective of today is to identify where the challenges for the promises are and what are actually feasible or promisable venues of translating the regulation into actionable practices or even requiring more. So maybe we start with the politics here. Annika.
Hi. Is the microphone working? Yeah, it's working. Amazing. Hi, everyone. Good morning, and thanks so much for having me on this panel. My name is Annika. I work, as Mirko said, for the Greens as a digital policy advisor in the IMCO committee. So that's the Internal Market and Consumer Protection Committee. That was one of the leading committees working on the AI Act. I'm currently also following the AI Act implementation through a dedicated working group in the European Parliament, where we meet approximately once or twice a month with the European Commission to ask them specifically about how they plan to implement the AI Act, what issues there are on national level, where implementation is still lagging behind, whether they're working on guidelines, whether the standards are going to be done in time, which is also one of the big questions that we hear a lot. In addition to that, I also work in the European Democracy Shield Committee, which was recently established by the European Parliament, where we also focus a lot on the implementation of the AI Act and specifically the risks of AI and what they pose to democracy. And in terms of my overall view, or as a bit of a starting point for the discussion, I would frame the two big topics that, at least from a Greens perspective, we currently are working on or we see. One topic would be defending the AI Act, basically, in addition to implementing it. And the one other area I see is building new technologies in Europe. So why do I say defending? Some of you might be aware that the European Commission and the European People's Party and the European right-wing parties are currently really running a very, very aggressive simplification agenda. And simplification can mean streamlining of different EU laws, but can also mean dismantling EU laws. We see that also on the AI Act. We see it on the GDPR, which will both fall under the digital omnibus, which will come at the end of this year, which means that the laws will be reopened. We don't know to what extent. We hear that there might be more exemptions for small and medium enterprises. I will say that there are already a lot of exemptions in the AI Act for small and medium enterprises, so I'm not sure how many more exemptions we can put in there. But basically, it puts the entire AI Act at risk, and there are a lot of companies, especially US companies, but also European companies, that are really running a very aggressive lobby strategy at the moment to go through with this simplification agenda on the AI Act. There are also discussions about a moratorium on the AI Act, stop the clock, different kind of buzzwords that are typical for Brussels, basically meaning that we should stop implementing the AI Act, which is a bit funny because, for instance, on Article 5, which are the bans in the AI Act, we have already started to enforce them or implement them. So let's see how this is going to work together. So here as Greens, we really try to defend the law, even though the law isn't perfect, which I think we're also going to hear later, in terms of fundamental rights, in terms of social rights, and in terms of environmental standards, which is something we also really fought for in the AI Act. And then on a more positive note, another thing that as Greens we are currently working on also with other political groups is really trying to see that the European Union builds a European tech ecosystem. We see massive dependence on US companies, not only US companies, also Chinese companies in our entire tech infrastructure, which really will put us at risk in terms of cybersecurity, but also general infrastructure. For instance, there was the case of the ICC where access to documents or emails was no longer possible because of the dependence on the US. So here we do see quite some hesitancy from the Commission, and I would hope for a bit more innovative spirit and a bit more push also to really think how can a European tech ecosystem look like. Also when we think about that EU tech might also be a bit more adherent to EU laws than we see it, for instance, now with the US completely lobbying against any adherence to Digital Services Act or the AI Act. So these are the two big themes that I currently see, and very curious about the other panelists and also maybe what happens in the member states in terms of EU AI Act implementation.
Thank you so much, Annika. Angela, may I ask you to speak about the perspective from Algorithm Watch? And
thanks a lot also for having me and for the invitation to this panel. I'm Angela. I'm part of the executive management team at Algorithm Watch. We're a NGO based in Berlin and in Zurich, and really our goal is to ensure that algorithms and AI eventually actually promote democracy, human rights, sustainability, justice, rather than undermining them. So maybe just, if we think about the AI concretely, I think we cannot do this, and you have mentioned that in your introduction, without looking at, what background do we actually face in the moment. So there's a world with a handful of tech companies that promote AI, but that also promote AI as the solution to all kinds of societal problems, that accumulate massive concentration of power. It is on one hand market power, because these are just the richest companies in the world. But it is also opinion power, because they provide AI tools, but at the same time they also provide social media platforms. They actually offer software infrastructure of public administration, of companies, of schools, of media, and so on. So this is like also a huge opinion power, so it's quite multidimensional. And then we see also quite illustratively lately that they also have some kind of political power. And this is the background we're speaking against, and at the moment we have to say there is not really AI without big tech. So I think given that background, this is really not just a debate about technology, it's a debate about power, the division of power in our societies, about justice. So how can we make sure that this is a kind of technology that does not only benefit those who are already privileged, but everyone? And I think when we talk about justice and power and democracy in our society, this is not a debate that should be dominated by big tech. And I think here civil society and activism plays a key role, and of course other stakeholders that should really be key to this debate. Right now we also see that there's this narrative that we can also see in Europe, and I think you both mentioned that somehow bigger is better when it comes to AI, right? We just have to throw more money into it, and then we have to build more data centers and so on. You could really see that, for example, at the AI Action Summit in February, where this is was the flavor of the summit. And then you see, these other narratives, like AI solves all these societal problems in the future, probably all these speculative assumptions also. We have the AI race that you can also feel in Europe and so on, and then plus the geopolitical landscape, of course. And what this leads to is that also this very idea that democratic societies have to shape and also govern this kind of technology instead of vice versa is under attack, right? it is really, you can see, for example, in the US that they try to ban actually a state-level AI regulation and so on. So that is, this very idea is, I think that's very different from like when we met here at CPDP 1 year ago. So I think we need like broad political and also societal discussions on the one hand on concrete political processes like the AI Act and how to implement it and how to really enforce it. But I think it also needs to be embedded into a more holistic approach to AI and what do we want of this kind of technology? How do we address the power structures behind it, the political economy behind it, and so on? Because this technology didn't just fall from the sky, right? It's an entire ecosystem behind. And it has to be an inclusive discussion about, not, do we want AI or not, but really what kind of AI do we want? How can we make sure it is a sustainable technology that actually benefits all of us and not just a few? And again, I think this is really a debate where civil society plays a key role to also help build this, what you also mentioned, this sustainable AI ecosystem in the public interest. Maybe just to end concretely on the AI Act, I think it's important to say the AI Act is one piece of the puzzle. What I always found the most irritating about this act is actually its name, because it sounds like it regulates everything about AI. But it's really only one piece of the puzzle, and we see all these other kinds of regulation. And I think we should also look at it as one piece of the puzzle. It's a really particular approach to AI. It's a very technical approach, a product safety approach. And as civil society, we have fought a lot over the last years in coalition with others, to make sure it is really oriented at fundamental rights. And of course, it remains important also now in the implementation phase to ensure that this orientation at fundamental rights is there. And I think civil society in collaboration with other kinds of stakeholders are really important. So I think we should really focus on this piece, but don't, lose sight of like the bigger picture that is actually behind it.
Thank you, Angela. Rob?
Thank you. Let me refresh my notes. Good morning, everyone. To introduce myself, I'm working on AI governance more from a micro level. I have a lot of hats. That's what happens when you stay in academia for a long time without a full professorship. So I work at the Knowledge Center Data and Society, where I coordinate actions, and our mission is really simple. We want to make sure that AI governance, legal and ethics is provided with tools and knowledge so that people who are working with AI and data-driven software or other appliances know how to operationalize AI governance, where to me the biggest challenge is not, well, what is in the law, but rather, or what is ethics, but rather how can we translate this so that people can start using it in practice. So that's a big and difficult challenge we meet over there. Secondly, I'm also involved in a few ethics committees. There's one from AI for Belgium, which is more bottom-up, where we try to meet with the different Belgian regions. So we always struggle with our political structure. You can have an AI committee that is responsible for Brussels. You can have one for Flanders. You can have a government in the Walloon area. You can have a federal level. And all these things are creating their own small AI baronies with their own interpretations of what ethics should be, how they should apply AI Act, and so on. So we're really happy that we meet without any compensation or financial support to at least try to align how these different initiatives are evolving. So there it's more about aligning our interests. Then I'm also responsible as a president for the ethics board for AI applications at the Belgian federal level. There we are allocated 6 hours per meeting, 4 meetings per year, to make sure that all the ethics are governed for AI within the Belgian government. This is quite a large government, not as big as the Flemish one, for example, but still very large. And they have a lot of key AI applications. So this is already quite challenging. And I think this brings me to then, what am I actually doing? Well, I ask myself this question every day. From a research perspective, what are we doing? And is this AI governance? And I guess this is where it gets interesting when we talk about implementing AI governance. It seems that there are two fields that get priority or right of way. we have the economical, technological fields where we often hear, yes, you can do ethics, but be careful, don't go too hardline. All the programs you're part of are funded by a Minister of Economy or Innovation. So the bottom line is, whatever you're doing, make sure that AI creates more money or more efficiency. It's either cost saving when it's the government, it's increasing value when it's part of the private economy. And there I have to do a balancing act. I cannot be this hardline ethicist that says everything you're doing is turning the world into shit, and in 10 years from now we will have problem with global warming and there will be resource problems and so on. No, that's not really something. We have to go for the, and that's what I liked yesterday, another ethicist said, I have to go for the co-ethics washer. To get in, I actually have to make my hands dirty. I have to go in and say, look, I'm going to help you, but let's start with the low-hanging fruits. We have to do this, he said, because otherwise the door closes. If I'm too hardline, the door doesn't open. And my job is getting in and getting people enthusiastic. So with the Knowledge Center, we're doing this. We even have a self-help group where we talk to other ethicists and where we share these insights. I think what we need most in AI governance is psychological support and funding, but maybe psychological support first. And that's really worrying if you think about it, and that's where I think I can start turning to the AI Act. 3 years ago, I read a wonderful article by people from LSTS who organized this conference. It was called the Edification of ICT Governance. Back before AI was a big thing, we saw this trend that a lot more effort was put into ethics committees. Even from the GDPR, we saw this trend that some of these decisions were delegated to ethics committees. And I thought, well, is this a bad thing? I don't know. Because now I'm feeling with the AI Act that this edification is turning around again. I don't have a fancy word yet, but this legislation, something where you get more attention for governing AI from a legalistic point of view is turning around. Almost every session we do about AI ethics turns into a debate about what are we expected to do with regards to the AI Act. And I'm a bit afraid because this brings me to the other big logic or perspective in which we are reducing AI governance. We had economics and technological progress as one together. The other one is legislation. The other one is saying you can only talk about ethics if it's moving the economy forward or if you are moving the law forward or applying it in the correct way. And what does that mean? And I think that's my perspective, or the one we need to be very careful about. Critique or moral philosophical inquiry or questions about diversity are optional. And you can see this in many ways. There's a lot of boundary work, meaning you don't get in. I talked about the hardline ethicists not getting in. That's the critical moral philosophical inquiry we are losing. On the other hand, there's a lot of boundary work from people in legal fields that say, well, this is not in the AI Act, so it's not important. And companies are following this logic. Big organizations are following the same. I think almost every public administration I encounter is now more worried about the AI Act. Who do they call? Their DPO. What are the DPOs doing? They are starting their own internal boundary work. I don't know whether that concept is clear. Boundary work is a sociological term where, as a scientist or an expert, you say who gets to speak and who needs to shut up because they don't know what they're talking about, basically. And that's happening here again. Now the DPOs are fighting from their GDPR boundary work and saying, we know what is up with AI governance, but there's this new AI Act people coming up and they're saying, no, you don't. You don't. We have right of way. We know how it's working. And I think I want to stop there. We need to be really careful about this boundary work. It's about higher powers in society, but they manifest themselves in every meeting through this small boundary work. So next time you're somewhere, ask who is allowed to have a say, what are the things they are allowed to say, and what are we forgetting? Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Now, I'm glad that we also have a real researcher here who's making maybe more sense of that from the outside perspective into AI development and AI legislation. Please.
Yeah, so hello, my name is Katja Meyer. I'm from the University of Vienna and the Center of Social Innovation. I'm an STS researcher, a sociologist. I've worked a lot in computational social science, and the last years I've focused a lot on open science policy. And this is also the reason, I think, why Mirko invited me to this panel. Thank you very much for this invitation. And I want to talk briefly about the relation of science and the AI Act, because actually what struck me, and I'm not very good in reading legal texts, it's like making a problem in my head. But I read it, and what struck me was this very simple exclusion of science in the text. It basically says, to support innovation, the AI Act has specific provisions related to scientific research. And then it says, blah, 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 it's not applicable to any activities related to research, testing, and development before it's marketed and put into operation. That struck me. What the hell, I was thinking. I mean, what is that? AI is full of science. It's feeling like a huge social scientific experiment, isn't it, right? It has, as Mireille Hildebrand said yesterday, it has real big issues with being tested, being evaluated, being true to its promises. But it is definitely not something you can kind of put the boundaries on, like say, this is just market product, this is, and with all the product liabilities things, and this is just science. It's all together, and that's how we think it. So AI being full of science, let me address the elephant in the room here at this conference and in many other conferences. And Mireille Hildebrand really triggered me yesterday, I have to say. So I know if you don't put the computer science track into a conference program, the computer science people will not come, because otherwise they cannot, afford and make it nice and shiny to their superiors. But where is the social science track? Social sciences have invented eugenics. They have invented with it some of the most important statistical methods that are now part of AI, which is regression, correlation, Pearson, Galton, you name a few of the statisticians, the early statisticians, and also eugenicists, as if the social sciences were so innocent and just the ethics people, right? So let's be clear. Social sciences have invented many of the tools and mechanisms that now drive AI systems, targeted advertisement, behavioral profiling, the entire machinery of platform capitalism, if you like, right? I get really aroused when I say that, but it's true, right? So social scientists have not just observed social media, they created social media. The people around Zuckerberg, they took a course in social network analysis, and then they co-built and also stole a bit of such a social media network. We should not forget this, right? The problem is, so we in the social sciences help to create and operationalize it. And yes, we have also been complicit in some of its most exploitative forms. And we also invented the term bias and. Where are the social scientists? I don't know about you. I mean, many here are very familiar also with the industry, I guess. So when you go to conferences where the social sciences are very present in the topic of AI, these are mostly marketing conferences, for example, Where are the ethics tracks there? Sometimes you find them, but not as big as they should be, right? So we have to think about this. And the problem is, it's not so easy, but a lot is happening in computer science already. So we have a new, even participatory audit space that is established. They do a lot of things. But where is this in the social sciences? So please, next year, here at CPDP, give them a dedicated track too. Yeah, can somebody do that, please? One thing I hear a lot, and this is related to the elephant in the room, many people that were involved in the crafting of the AI Act and other regulation around it tell me that a lot of expertise was missing. So, for example, and then the colleagues of of Open Future, who also will speak, I guess, about this, have pointed, for example, a really nice example out when you read the text of the GPAI Code of Practice. So the way data collection, the term data collection was framed in there, it was basically framed as web scraping. What the hell, yeah? I mean, this is really not all of data collection that flows into AI models and anything else. So anyway, let's not talk so much about the differences. I want to come back to the positive side why I invited me. Where is our agency, right? How can we enforce it? So now I told you I've been working in science policy for the last years, and I've been involved very much in the open science movement. And since the problem with the AI Act saying that science is exempted means that most of the scientists, at least that I know, they say, okay, checked, they turn around and go away. But that's not how the situation should be. I see with open science one particular route of agency that we have, and that also companies have, actually. And some companies have already, embraced it. Think about Hugging Face and other, like big platforms, they try to make AI more accountable, right? So to the industry people in the room, if you want to be bold, if you have already, demolished, no, not saying demolished, but have let your ethics department resign, maybe be bold and try another route. I'm now also doing a bit of co-ethics washing. No, but bringing more open science into it. Not just go for open source, go for open science, because this is what we can do. And then I stop very briefly, just several of the modes and opportunities that open science has created in the last decades. By the way, funded with billions from the European Union, right? We should not forget about this. So we have, in the open science world, we have built transparency infrastructure. We have built different sorts of structured documentation, persistent identifiers, federated repositories, trusted research environments, where you could even let researchers access your data. Imagine that. And they can do some research on your proprietary data to see what's happening. Community evaluation frameworks, open accountability platforms, reproducibility and traceability. And last but not least, there is fair data. I don't know how many of you know about it, but it's a very good system of working with data that not necessarily is open, but is still accountable. So I want to stop here. I just want to say there are a lot of opportunities, but they're not seen because people think there is no relation because science is exempted, and it makes no sense at all.
Thank you, Katja. So we've seen that there are some grave challenges. One challenge is maybe the watering down of regulation that would protect European citizens. Another thing is missing of competences, capacities, and practices to ensure actually implementing the AI Act or responsible practices. Those go much further than what the AI Act actually demands. In Utrecht, we spoke to 33 members of 33 municipalities in the Netherlands. They all indicated that they will write local additional regulation for the AI Act. To them, the AI Act is just the floor, and the ethics will be the ceiling, and it will be higher in one municipality or the other. And they all said it is just not sufficient what the AI Act is providing, also because it's not covering what we call algorithms. Looking at Europe, I think sometimes it helps if a country has a real scandal around algorithms. In the Netherlands, the conversation is much more easier to have, and actually ethics committees very often get a better, stronger mandate and real support. So let's focus on a number of things here. I think one thing is the really limited perception of what AI is and what it does, a real problem that our citizens, our decision makers, many politicians are very short-sightedly informed what AI actually entails and what it does. Actually, we're dealing with technological imaginaries, fantasies, what is portrayed mostly in the media, speculation, but very far away from the real actual applications of artificial intelligence. So I asked the panel, what would be a really feasible step to go into that direction, to inform better understanding of AI. And I think the term AI is already the problem. It is a nice umbrella term, but it is actually not describing what we're talking about. And sometimes someone joked one time if cybernetics would have been dominant in science, and no one would be talking about it because it's such a less sexy term than AI. Anyway, so please help us to understand what would be really needed steps to get larger parts of the electorate on board to understand what is AI, what does it make with our society, and why is regulation necessary. May I start with the activist in the room?
Yeah, I think that's a real issue because at least for like the last 2.5 years, there has just been this heavy focus on generative AI. And I don't know, you know, like if you speak to, I don't know, family and friends, probably, and you mentioned the term AI, that's what they think of, right? It's, that's ChatGPT, and it started 2.5 years ago. And then you have to explain, no, it started more than 70 years ago, and actually, you know, it has a different kind of history, and it's all around us. And I think also I mean, on the one hand, like this definitional question is really something that will make a difference concretely in the AI Act, because we have seen that in the guidelines, it's just still not clear what kind of system will actually fall under it. But also, like generally in, as you say, in the debate, I think it's something that, you know, we shouldn't let us distract by having to define whether a system is actually AI or not, and so on. It's just, I mean, it's about automation, and it's about the impact on people and on societies that actually counts. I think what helps here and what is really important is storytelling. As you said, in the Netherlands, the discussion is a different one because there have been this scandal. I think we shouldn't, you know, invent scandals or just make sure there's a scandal. But I think, you know, these stories are everywhere, but it really needs a lot of work to uncover them, actually. So it needs journalism, it needs civil society, it needs researchers. So you need an entire ecosystem, actually, to make sure that these stories are being told. And that was the same. That was also the case in the Netherlands, in the Dutch scandals in the Netherlands. So there was this ecosystem behind. There were journalists and activists and researchers who really, you know, didn't stop looking into that. And that's what we need in other places too, because it's not like we have to invent these scandals, but the evidence is there, but we really have to be able to tell the stories around them.
Thank you. Yes, we're blessed in the Netherlands with really competent tech journalists, but also media, editing rooms that think this is something the audience wants to read and to hear. There's an example of the Italian teacher's algorithm, appointment teacher algorithm, that teachers would be coupled to schools, that completely failed, but the media wouldn't write about it because they thought no one wants to read that. It's too complicated, it's AI. So to the politics, how would you mobilize that? And another question that is probably urgent, where are the digitally savvy politicians?
There are some in the European Parliament. It depends a bit, but there are people who are really willing to do the work and to also engage with scientists, with researchers, with NGOs to really try to understand AI. But at the same time, I see a lot of politicians that really only frame AI, and then it comes to storytelling around innovation. And I think you can talk about AI and what AI can do without neglecting that there's also questions of safety, and that questions of safety are really fundamental to also the use of AI in the EU, because if AI systems and models are not safe, you cannot expect European companies to use AI. And that is the big problem we also see now with, for instance, the pushback against the code of practice on general purpose AI models, that European companies are pushing against a code that would actually help them have safer AI models that they can implement into their own systems. And it's so really just being also willing to accept that this technology is not just amazing. It can be, but it can be even better if it has certain safeguards. So I think really this willingness to also just look a bit further and not just, you know, take the cheap route and just talk about innovation and what AI can do, but also frame it a bit more around safety. And actually, you can also make a business case around safety, because having, for instance, also a European ecosystem of evaluators of AI models and AI systems can actually also really build an entire business case around really making the best models, not only the most innovative, but also the safest ones.
But Annika, isn't it not only a question of safety, isn't it also a question of what kind of society do we want to have? And you can, in the entire political spectrum of the European Parliament, design different futures of AI connected to the different ideological positions present in that parliament. So isn't it a danger that you just focus on safety? Everybody would agree upon, say, yes, of course we want safety, we don't want to put people in harm's way, but rather to portray how, in the case of the Greens, artificial intelligence would be related to their ideological perspectives, in opposite to the far right or the liberal parties and others.
Yeah, I think safety is really like the absolute minimum denominator. Now also I fully acknowledge that safety is kind of a framing that really goes to like, okay, AI is either going to destroy humanity or is going to be safe. So I understand that the safety framework is quite limited, but at the same time, at the moment, it's like the minimum I see that people can agree on, because at the same time, we're, for instance, also in the EU currently setting up gigafactories for AI to build possibly AGI made in the EU. And we didn't even have the conversation whether we actually want AGI and whether that is safe. So we have moved so far away from what kind of society do we actually want to build, what kind of rights do we want to have implemented in AI, that safety is kind of the least common denominator at the moment that I see that is in the I would say, discourse that is happening at the moment.
Yeah, it's fascinating that so much money is spent on something that lacks any empirical evidence. Spoken about evidence and research, one thing that I find troubling when I look at researchers is that they are not very much engaged with society. So I'm glad that Rob is here, who's sitting on the panel, and that we have Katja here to think about that. So what would be the role of researchers, and how would they actually go out of the ivory tower? What would they do, and what would be efficient?
Should I start?
Please do.
Yeah. I mean, first of all, I just have to say, I'm so fed up with this innovation versus regulation thing, because it's just so silly. I mean, safety is part of any kind of innovation, right? It's totally absurd, you know? I mean, even the rockets that go up to space, where so many of these AI guys want to live, or their next future millions of generations see to live there, it's all about safety. Oh, I mean, sorry. So can we just, not tap into this trap? I would say it's really a trap, you know? So I'm very much aligned, and also from a research side and from an activist research side, to go into the innovation, right? To play with these innovation narratives, to construct innovation narratives that are alternative in their setting, that are speculative as the whole AI hype is anyway, right? So, but I think the real problem, and I'm coming back to what I said before, is access, right? So as researchers, we do not have enough access. And I learned this from my legal scholar friends. They always say, yeah, but there is a law for that already. But actually, when we look back in history, when we look at the whole issue of gender, the people who were activists for more gender equality, they can tell you very similar stories of what we are doing now. The people who were social media activists that were trying to open up the highly biased, totalitarian, and shittified platforms, right? They were facing a lot of the same issues that we do today. And the EU has, with the Digital Services Act, for example, tried to accommodate these issues by, for example, now having this very complicated but nevertheless system of access to very large platforms. That's the only reason why I'm still on Twitter/X, because I just wanted to stay a very large platform. So please don't leave it. Mm-hmm. If not more than 45 million people are registered there, we cannot get access to it anymore. So, by the way, and small and medium enterprises, whatever. So, and I see that now the big problem with AI is, and the enforcement, is that this access is nowhere mentioned. We are talking about we are talking about questionnaires and self-evaluation tools. What the fuck? I mean, this is not where it should be going, right? And now with the DSA, I thought we have learned what we can do, but it seems we have not, yeah? And so, as I wanted to illustrate with open science, there's a lot of options that would also be helpful to industry. Together create a responsible innovation, right? And they can make huge profits from that. It's not about, and they can be safe and trusted, right? And in addition have some ethics with it too, right? But why? The problem is when you look at the regulatory sandbox model that is now in, or the AI gigafactories, whatever they are called, is no access for research, or at least with the regulatory sandboxes, it's just for legal scholarship, right? That makes no sense at all. We're going to have more accompanying research.
Thank you. Thank you. And just the note on the DSA, we do a lot of data research at the data school in the Utrecht University. We don't have access to Twitter. The DSA is there. We don't have access. We don't get access to the data. So we don't do any research on Twitter anymore.
But you know, even Twitter is was never scientifically high quality access because it was never even random sampling happening there. Anyway, so
Rob, so you are on such a panel. You are one of these scholars who actively mingle and try to bring their knowledge from the ivory tower to the practice. Is that something that's appreciated in your university? Is that something you can put into your work? Are there hours budgeted for that?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, for the suggestive question. Unfortunately, no. I already mentioned. Yeah, the funding is a problem. I think it's the same for AI researchers as well. By the way, so people doing AI engineering, they don't get rewarded for critical notes. They do need to do open science, and then feel bad when OpenAI runs away with their results and capitalizes on that. They are very actively involved. I've been to a few conferences where they say, should we even do open science? Because we're enabling something we don't want to see. So I'm seeing the speculation, it's a bit late.
I know, but I want the companies to be open scientific.
I understand. So I think there's a problem. And I think the AI Act is actively pushing scientists outside of their moral responsibility. It's not true. They could say we don't need the AI Act. There are other things, but you create a discourse where you say you can just do whatever you want. There's no moral responsibility for you. Just publish everything so that someone else can take it and valorize that. And it's a silly model because Europe is indeed, and that's the second reason where AI researchers become very mercantile. They say we should limit our open access to US companies, to Chinese companies. So they are already thinking about these things. And now they're very worried about militarization as well, which isn't really addressed that much either in the AI Act. But they see how all their results can be reused. And now they also get internal competition between the people who will apply for defense budgets and who will not. And again, I think it's the ones who will not that will remain quite silenced and marginalized as a group.
So this is interesting. What we actually heard is there are two things at stake here or that are relevant. Much of the work that is going into improving AI systems in making sure they do not harm too many people is, you might say, care work or caretakers work that takes place behind the scenes. It's not visible, it's not fancy, it's not sexy, it's not something with glamour or glory. It is behind the scenes, writing an amendment for a law text or trying to convince people to carve out some space for critical voices, working on a panel which is not rewarded monetary, or you don't even have the recognition through your supervisor, fixing data sets in the background. So much of this work that actually makes the system function is repair work that we don't see. So let's speak quickly about how could we actually boost that and create better capacities for this care work that's behind the scenes, that's not visible, is most often out of the attention of any policy maker or decision maker, and largely the audience, and I would assume many of the people present here have little information of what this kind of work entails and how much labor, how much invisible labor goes into it. For instance, starting with these ethics boards, very often it's ethics washing. First questions I always ask is, how well is it funded? How well is it supported? Do you have a full-time secretary that is actually helping the members to do their work? What is the mandate would be the second question. Does a minister have to react to your findings? Will that be published in parliament, etc.? So researchers present who want to have a great topic, I think, is compare ethics committees that are sprawling like mushrooms at the moment and are very different in the quality, funding, and competences and mandate they have. But there are more of these things, and I would like to ask each panel member very quickly, what is the invisible labor that you find essential in making sure this goes into the right direction, and what would you need to boost the capacities and competences for that?
Maybe I can start. The main resource and knowledge that we got when we worked on the AI Act was through the work of NGOs and researchers. So funding them, making sure that they have enough resources to really work on this is essential for our work. And I would like to point out that there's also a massive campaign at the moment on EU level against NGOs, against the funding of NGOs, and it is really critical that also everyone here is aware that this is happening. And it's not only that there's a lot of funding lacking now because of what is going on in the US, but there's also really an active campaign from the political right, including EPP, to really defund NGOs and make NGOs' life much more difficult, and also researchers' life. So I want to point that out, because without them, evidence-based policymaking is not possible.
Yeah, you might think when you follow the rhetoric of several politicians that evidence-based policy is really not on their agenda, but more ideology-informed policy. So you are probably one of those NGOs that got the funding. So what is the invisible labor you do and you need better capacities for?
That got the funding. I mean, I think I can relate to what Annika just said. You know, there is really a shrinking space. I think not just for civil society, also for researchers that work on AI, not only from a technical perspective, say. Like the entire ecosystem of people who look at AI not in isolation, but like at the context in which AI is being built and deployed. And I think we have to be really aware of the fact of this shrinking space in terms of funding, because you know, we see that funding is being cut in other areas. Philanthropy has to, you know, jump in to cover other areas and so on. So that's really one thing. But also, like what I said in the beginning, like that this sheer idea of AI governance is under attack or is being questioned. And I think here is a bit where I'm careful of the safety framing also. I totally understand what you mean in terms of, you know, at least this is where we can get in. And that's a bit also the tactics of, okay, we're okay with this framing. But I'm also skeptical of it because if we say, you know, we have to work on safety of AI, that really sounds like this is a technical issue, right? Safety is something you have to do. You have to code into your AI system. So that's how it sounds to people. And I think that's also a bit of the problem, like that the AI Act is this product safety approach. And this is already in tension with a fundamental rights perspective and so on. And I think it is really key that we have to say, okay, if we really want AI to function for us as a society, for us as individuals, it has to be more than safe. And it's not just the technical and the industry people who need to be involved.
Thank you. To the two researchers in the room, what would you need from your universities to do a better job in informing audiences and engaging with stakeholders?
Of course, more funding, but that's obvious. Though I think I also wanted to tie to the other question. I think it's less boundary work. We are protecting our rights by a lot of experts, and that means we lack moral agency. I often ask publics, who here has an ethical opinion or can formulate ethical opinions about AI? And nobody raises their hands. So I go, do you think you can raise ethical opinions in general? And then I get 5 hands out of 100, and I say, did anyone kill someone, rob someone, discriminate actively today? And they all say no. So I say, no, you can think ethically, but somewhere in society we said, also being morally outraged is something we will delegate to the experts. And that's something really harmful. I think if you need to add funding to universities, it's to create this capacity again that anyone, even if they didn't study at the university, are entitled to become morally outraged by all the shitty things we're doing. But we decided not to do that anymore. It's the opposite of open science, I guess. It's saying you're not entitled to have an opinion anymore.
And then those experts, they spend all their time on the trolley problem, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, so no, what I would need is that first of all, my university would sign the Quara agreement, which is also very nice European initiative on changing the way research is rewarded, like, you know, giving points, performance points for outreach activities, policy activities, like the whole third mission of universities, which there is a movement for that, but my university has not signed it. And a lot of others also haven't. And the second thing I would want is to go deeper into all these disciplines that also would not see themselves as being the ones to address it, like the behavioral sciences that now start to merge even more with data science, all the new, you know, forms of statistics that come up in whatever, you know, names, fancy master course names they pop up, and go in there and teach there, because I see a lot of teaching of ethics and data ethics. For example, I myself teach data ethics to computer scientists for quite a long time in critical data studies, but I want to do it to the behavioral scientists, but I never get invited there.
Well, you have to work on that. Before we are talking for a long time now, we would like to open this up to the floor. Do you have any questions to our audience members? There is one there already, so I'm coming with a microphone to you. If you quickly introduce yourself, your name.
Sure. Hi, I'm Gwen from the University of Graz. I have a question maybe to all the panelists, but yeah, we'll see. So when it comes to the AI Act, what provisions would you defend at all costs, and which provisions should be raised through, for example, the work of ethics committees or works councils, etc.?
Yeah, I can already go ahead. I think Article 4, which is already being, well, reinterpreted or opened, which says we need AI literacies for anyone working with AI. If you think about it, everyone is already working with AI, so everyone requires a basic form of AI literacy. And the response has been from the AI office now, let's gather best practices. If you're just trying and showing you're trying hard, then it's fine. I think this is very weak and silly. You started off strong saying you need this, but then we don't know what to do with it, or it was too ambitious. I don't know why they are watering it down. I think it's interesting to see who needs to have AI literacy. That's not in the article. I don't think everyone needs it. We don't want to go to the GDPR thing where everyone is expected to know their rights, but they're simply too complex for a lot of people, and that's their fault.
Yeah, so I can continue because I don't remember any article numbers or whatever. But there are two things maybe connected. I'm very much against the opening up of the GDPR. I think it's really important not to go too far because it's a strong basis for what we can do in the AI Act. And secondly, I think we should go more and look more into the harmonization of the AI Act with other legal frameworks, like the from my humble non-expert opinion, like the chain supply, whatever it's called, regulation, and the Cybersecurity Act. Speaking of research security, you know, and these things are not yet mentioned, so I would like to see more. And I hope that the GPDP.ai Code of Practice would actually open up these routes again, but yeah, I would like to see that more there.
Let's move on to the next question. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Dave Lewis from Trinity College Dublin. Perhaps a question primarily for Rob, especially Katia. You touched on, you know, this sort of regulatory turn in AI ethics, and obviously in academia we do a lot of research ethics assessment, but we also see, I do some service in some of the computer science conferences on their ethics reviews as well. So there is work going on, a lot of insights going on, but I think we're not very good at sharing it. So do you think there's room there for adopting some of the open science practice in sharing some of the outcomes of our ethical assessments, especially of AI at the cutting edge as it comes through the research community?
Yes, I very much agree. I think Mirko and Iris have been doing really great work on the fundamental rights impact assessment, and we're seeing that return as a return in the AI Act as well. I mean, people are referring to this. So one of the worst things we're doing in ethics efforts in general is not publicizing them. I don't know why that happens all the time, maybe because we're not entirely proud of what happened. But I think we are inspiring a lot of people if we share the best practices we already have. To me, it's always a bit of an annoying thing to do, go to a computer science conference and preach about ethics to a community that has been doing ethics long before the AI hype. So I don't like doing that because you already know what you're doing, and it would be great if you export it more.
But they need high impact journals for that. That's the problem. There's no, so nature or science or whoever should do a special, they do all journals every week, there's new journals. So they could do a journal for exactly that. That would be great.
Thank you. Next question.
Antonio Kung. So I'm working on standardization, and I've been involved in the AI trustworthiness work, which is dealing with the AI Act for Sentinel, and also I'm editing 27091 AI privacy protection. Okay, so the problem we have right now is a roadmap thinking, because actually AI is everywhere, so we are siloed and we need to agree and to integrate. Okay, so that's why maybe the Act would put the word safety, because we would highlight that this is important. Yes, it is, but it is siloed. So I can tell you, the engineers working on safety, there are not so many. Okay, so we need integration. So when it comes to all those regulations, they are created in a siloed way. So I'm working on the AI Act, but I'm not working on CRA. So did they exchange? Okay, so my question is whether this will stay like this, or whether we can in the future have a way so that we unsiloed the way we build the laws.
Maybe I can briefly react to this. As critical as I am of the digital omnibus, this is exactly what the omnibus is supposed to also address, which is overlaps with other laws and streamlining with other laws, especially for cybersecurity, and also GDPR and so on. So there is a view to really harmonize also with the different laws that the AI Act is interacting with. The only question is whether it will also be used to deregulate all of these laws that are in the omnibus. But in principle, that is the idea of the omnibus.
Thank you.
Maybe I can quickly add to that. I think that's really an important issue that you raise, because this is what I also meant. It's one piece of the puzzle, but you cannot just look at this piece in isolation. And maybe two thoughts. One is like that, for example, in standardization, it's really hard to get the fundamental rights expertise in. It's really hard for civil society to get in, also just because we just lack the resources, right? To do this, and this is why then the risk that is heavily industry dominated and so on. The other thing is, like, I think I always say, like, one illustration of this is, for example, if you think of generative AI tools, right? Because when are they really from a societal perspective should raise concerns when they are integrated into online platforms like social media, search engines, and so on. And there you have like this direct intersection of the AI Act, the Digital Services Act, and so on. So it's just like, this, as you say, the siloed approach at looking at regulation is just not, the world is just not structured into these silos.
If I may add, I think your invisible work question is really relevant here. Like, what invisible work are we missing here? We did it 4 years ago only for the Belgian, Flemish, European levels. Where are legal frameworks like creating contradictions or discrepancies or so much insecurity that the things are creating irrational results, Weber would say. And I think we need that as well. We're expecting a lot of agile and participatory interference while developing AI systems, but we're still not doing this for our own regulation. I mean, we're not developing trustworthy regulation. We're not involving all stakeholders. We're not checking whether everything is robust and compatible. And so I totally agree with you that this is a problem. And one of the unsexy things we could do is map where these frictions arise already before creating new siloed approaches.
Thank you. Over there.
And maybe if I just want to add, being more involved in the consultations. There should be a flood of commentaries, but this is again not rewarded in our systems. That's the problem.
Joe Pearson, Hazard University. I was wondering, when the title of this panel is AI Act in Action, isn't the weakest link, as we have also seen in GDPR, the oversight and enforcement issue? In a sense, looking at Belgium, for example, there's a whole tussle who should take the oversight, and yeah, it's a typical Belgian issue. But in general, yeah, GDPR, one of the weakest things was you don't need to fund a data protection agency. You can defund it, and then you have no GDPR almost. So isn't that also one of the major issues to enforce this thing?
Thank you. Excellent question. Maybe we start with Angela. To what do we expect from oversight, and how they what kind of capacities they should have, and maybe Annika can report on what is actually happening there.
Yeah, I think absolutely, and you know, even because many provisions are on the in the AI Act are still so unclear, starting with the definition of AI. So now we have these guidelines, but do they actually bring clarity or more confusion, and so on? Then we have Article 6, who actually basically lets providers decide for themselves whether their system is really high risk or not, and so on. So I think all these provisions are still like fluffy sometimes, or just vague, and this of course also is a problem then for implementation and enforcement. And then also I think the EU has learned from the GDPR experience, so with the AI board and so on, they want to make sure there's more coordination. I mean, I don't know about all the member states, but in many you can already see the delays just when it comes to the market surveillance authorities and so on. For example, in Germany, we'll miss the deadline that is actually this summer to assign one, and so on. We just heard, that the Commission actually says, enforcement will not start before summer 26, and so on. And I think this all shows a bit. This is a real issue that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
Even on the Digital Services Act, we still don't have enforcement authorities in all member states, which now led the Commission to fine multiple member states. So on AI, it's even worse. And one other element that I want to bring into it is that we really lack in the AI Act proper cooperation mechanisms in between the different member states and on EU level. And it's something that as Greens, we really tried to get into the AI Act, but we failed also because the member states didn't want that, and I see that also in other laws. Cooperating with other member states is like the biggest red light for the council, and it's really absurd because, of course, with AI, we know that an AI system is not just in one member state, it's in many member states, and there's really an added value in discussing with other enforcement authorities from other member states on what they have found out in order to really make sure that you have proper enforcement of the AI Act. So that's also a problem that I hope maybe in the future we can address.
Thank you so much. When we were here as the data school 4 years ago for the first time, we spoke about trickle-down policy, which we find something that is highly problematic and not working, as much as trickle-down economics is not working. And we are 4 years later and we see it's still a problem. There is a law, there's a text of law, but we still believe in it will trickle down and somehow ingrain itself into the practices. We're coming to a close of this wonderful panel. Please join me in thanking our speakers, and I want to give them also a bag from Utrecht Data School, because this panel was hosted by Utrecht Data School, and because you never have enough of these cloth bags, we give you another one. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for being with us here so early.